totally off topic, but I have to know how that serial killer was able to abscond with a Yakuza underboss. How did he end up getting wrapped up in that whole thing?
So Sekine again had been killing people, mostly disgruntled customers.
Oh, awesome.
Okay, well, he'd sell people these expensive dogs like Alaskan Malamutes. And he'd tell them, like, you can breed these dogs and make, a ton of money. Because there was a, huge, a sort of boom in exotic animals. But sometimes he'd sell people like sick dogs, like the dogs were infertile. And they would say, well, like you defrauded me. You lied to me. I'm going to go to the police. And he'd say, hey, let's talk this out. And he'd give them like a sports drink to drink. Usually it was yunker. Yunker is like one of these Japanese stamina drinks. And then there would be strychnine in it. And they'd die. And then he and his wife would chop the meat off the bodies. They'd feed it to the animals. I don't think we ever wrote in the paper that he fed it to the animals. And then they would take the bones to a place they had up in Guma and pulverize them and burn everything in a steel drum, so there was nothing left behind.
And I'm assuming that's what happened to the underboss as well.
Yeah. So the underboss realized that, and the time, which is really bizarre, is Sekine again, this pet shop owner, got some favorable coverage from some TV. So he was like a celebrity, right? And he was building this very elaborate new dog kennel, right? He was like a celebrity. You see him on TV. He had this bullshit story about, living in Africa and going on safari and stuff, and people ate it up. But when Endo realized that, Sekine had killed these people, he blackmailed him, and he was blackmailing him for a lot of money. Made himself part owner of the kennel. And Sekine, one day was chatting with Endo and his driver, Wakui-san. So he had this young driver whose parents had sort of entrusted Endo. His parent, Wakui, was like a juvenile delinquent whose parents had literally sort of handed him to Endo, this Yakuza boss, said, like, make my son a man, like straighten him out, get him off of drugs, make him a good guy. So he was Endo's driver. And Sekine gave both of them, stamina drinks were poisoned, and they died. Then he took the bodies, did this what he always did with the bodies, and chopped them up, and then disposed of them the usual way. When I was working on this story, I heard that from one of the detectives that while the wife was chopping up Endo's body, that she sang this Japanese song called Yosaku, and it's like Yosaku, kong kong kong, and there's like the sound of chopping in the song. And I tried to write that as an article, and my immediate boss was like, I checked this with another detective, and they said that's not true, so we can't write it. But it turned out in the trial it was true. She did sing enka, kind of like Japanese country western music, and that song while they were chopping up the body.
The moral of this story is, if you're going to buy a dog from somebody, keep it at that. Don't accept strange beverages, because this guy certainly had a pattern.
Yeah, don't accept strange beverages. The other thing that was about the strange beverages, Junkeru is this like, really, best-selling stamina drink. I mean, it has weird stuff in it. It has like viper tincture and civet mix and stuff.
Oh, boy.
It has a $3,000. It is like a $30 version, right? You can buy at the supermarket. And while I was working on that story, I called up Sato Seiyaku, the company that makes it, and I said, "Hey, I need to check to make sure that you have this. What's the highest price of your thing? The price you sell it for." And when I explained why, because I was saying, "Oh yeah, the serial killer used to give your drink with poison in it to people to kill them," the head was, the person on the phone was absolutely incensed. He was like, "Are you really going to put our name in the paper?" And I'm like, "Yes,
it's what happened."
That's journalism, right? We put the real name in. I'm sorry, but yes, yours was the one that he would use to, to poison and kill people with. And within a day, the head of Sato Seiyaku came down, and he had a talk with me and my boss. And after this long talk, my boss went into another room. he came back and he said, we're not going to name the company in the article. I'm like, I understand that that's the principle, but we're not going to do that. And I said, okay. And then I noticed that 2 weeks later, my boss had a new car, but I can't really say there was a causal connection there.
I'm sure one had nothing to do with the other. Maybe the trunk of the car was full of a lifetime supply of those beverages as well. It's hard to say how these things play themselves out.
Hard to say.
How close of a comparison would you say, I think we have a largely U.S. audience and most of them have heard of the mob. How close of a comparison would you say the U.S. mob is to how the Yakuza organization is structured in Japan?
I'd say they're completely different. I'd say because the Japanese mafia isn't hidden, right? I mean, the fact that we have fan magazines, right? Until 2018, when they forced one of the last ones out of business. When here's Goto Tadamasa on the cover of the magazine. Here's the number 2 of the Yamaguchi Gumi on it. I mean, they've got comic books about their lives.
And for clarity, we're talking about organized crime, right? Like we're talking about people who are breaking the law, and they allow that, like consumer facing, like right in your face.
Well, this is they claim to be humanitarian organizations. The term is Ninkyo Dantai. They claim to be like the Boy Scouts of Japan, preserving traditional values, keeping the peace, giving wayward youth a place to be disciplined, and keeping them in line. And they have a constitutional right to be together. And so, for many, many years in Japan, yes, it was like, yes, there are a lot of criminals in our group and some bad people, but we keep them in line. What is interesting, and one reason that I think the Yakuza were tolerated for so long, is that there are essentially crimes that they don't do. And if you went into Yakuza offices, they have kind of on the wall a list of the things that will get you kicked out of the organization. And, it's a low bar, but they are no theft, no robbery, no mugging, no using force to actually steal money from people. No sexual assault. Of course, that's not going to go over well with the local populace. Ostensibly, no dealing or using in drugs. And the 5th one is no unnecessary contact with the authorities. And so on some level, because they're not stealing, they're not breaking into people's houses and stealing, and they're not going to rob you on the street. They're not going to snatch your purse. They're not going to make you give up their wallet. And since they're running the red light districts behind there, they did sort of keep the peace in a sense. Mm-hmm. There's no street crime around a Yakuza office. No one's going to sneak. No one's going to steal your purse or mug you in an area where the Yakuza had their offices and had their territories in those days, because before the police could get to you, they'd probably get to you.
So they have a list of things that would get you kicked out. What would be hypothetically on the list of things that were okay for them to take part in?
Extortion and blackmail were always okay.
Okay.
As Takigaki Satoru-san once said to me, he's a retired Yakuza boss, who now writes some interesting books. He was like, yeah, if you're doing something so bad that the Yakuza can blackmail you, then you deserve the punishment you get, and that's social justice. That's not a crime.
I mean, that's some interesting, mental gymnastics and moral gymnastics.
Yes, racketeering, collecting protection money. It's like, yeah, we provide a service. If you're in our neighborhood and you have trouble with a customer or rowdy youth, or person next door is, too loud, we take care of that for you. And in return for that, we ask for a small servicing fee. So some Yakuza groups sort of function like, like low rent security companies.